Good morning and happy Tuesday to everybody. It's great to have you back. I'm happy to be back, and we're going to share with you some things about starting your own business. I don't know if you have an idea, you have a concept, you have a dream, a goal, something in mind. You say, man, I would really like to start my own business, or I'd maybe buy a franchise, or maybe I'll buy somebody else's business. But when we start thinking about that, I just want to let you know it's going to take a little bit of courage in order to start your own business. You know, courage is when everything about moving forward kind of puts you in a standstill. It makes your feet feel like they're in cement or in thick mud, and everything about your being says, don't do it, and you do it anyway. That's courage. It takes courage to start your own business, and if you're thinking about that, make sure you know that you're going to get some signals that fly by your head and some signs and some signals that say don't do it. But if you really want to do it, you're going to have to press forward and get through that. I can remember when I had the idea, I've had multiple ideas. I had an idea of starting my own tanning business and what that tanning business was going to be like, the tan lounge, I called it. And it was like a nightclub, and we served beer and wine and champagne, and it was kind of loungy. We had lounge music, and it was a cool thing. And we made that dream come into reality. I remember when we started Orange Theory Fitness from the very beginning, and we were talking about different concepts and ideas. I'm just going to tell you, it takes courage. The first thing, I just want to share with you some ideas about some things you might want to think about if you're going to try to get a business started. All you out there that have some courage and have a great idea and say, how do I go about it? And what's the first, second, or third thing I might want to do? First thing I would tell you to do is take out a blank sheet of paper and write down the concept. What is it that you're really trying to get started? And let me ask you this question. How is it uniquely different from anybody else? We call those, in the marketing world, we call those USPs, or unique selling propositions. But how is it uniquely different? A lot of people tell me they want to start a gym. They want to open up a gym. And I say, that's great. You know, I had the opportunity to open up a gym, and I go, well, how is it going to be any different than the gym down the road, or the gym down the street, or the gym across the block, or the fitness center, or the big box national brand fitness center? How is it going to be uniquely different? But I would ask you to take out a blank sheet of paper and start writing down the concept. Start writing down your pricing, and think about what your pricing is going to look like. Are you going to charge a competitive price? Are you going to try to underprice the competition? Are you going to try to overprice the competition? Maybe there is no competition, but is it going to be a monthly price? Is it going to be a recurring revenue model where you bill everybody every month? Is it going to be a lump sum amount of money that you have to collect? Are you going to allow people to make payments? Are you going to allow them to finance? Are you going to give them interest-free programs? You see a lot of different businesses do that or run those kind of programs. Is it going to be a term type of a payment? Then meaning they're going to sign up for a 2-year commitment, and then you're going to give them a better rate the second year than you did the first year. All I'm suggesting, you got to think about the pricing. You got to think about the personnel too. The number 3 piece is the personnel. What's the personnel going to look like? Who's going to run the darn thing? I mean, who's going to be in charge? Is that you? Are you actually going to run it, or are you just have an idea and a concept and you're going to put the money, but you really want to get what we call the subject matter expert to really come in and run that thing? Do you need frontline people? Do you need receptionists? Do you need cleaning people? Do you need maintenance people? Do you need delivery people? I don't know exactly what your program or your product would be, but are you going to need those people, and how much are you going to pay them? And if you're going to pay them, how are you going to pay them? Are you going to use a system to pay them? Are you going to do the payroll yourself? Are you going to use systems like ADP to pay them? It all depends, but you need to think about the personnel component, and then you need to create a organizational chart. You need to think about number 4 is your product and your programs. What programs are you going to be delivering, and what will you be offering? Is it going to be free, or if it's a service, is it going to be free for people to come in and try it out? If it's a product, are you going to have a low barrier product that people can buy for a low amount of money to try it? Or are you going to give away samples for people to try it? But you got to think about your program or your product and what that might look like. Number 5 is really your promotions and how you're going to market this thing, and how are you going to tell the community, or how are you going to tell the group, your customer base, whether it's a 1 mile, whether it's a 3 mile, whether it's citywide, whether it's an online program. How are you actually going to get the word out there? What's the megaphone? I use a megaphone. It's an older term, but what's the megaphone that you're going to use? Is it going to be a multi-channel megaphone? Are you going to talk on different channels and social media and print advertising? Are you going to use digital advertising? Are you going to be big enough to use TV and radio? Are you going to be doing outreach programs? And is it going to be really what I call local word of mouth marketing? You're going to expect people to tell their friends, and you're going to give them an incentive to really promote this program or this service or this product. Number 6 is you need to think about the processes that you're going to have, and how are you going to formalize those processes? Are you going to have a sales system? What's the first thing you're going to do? What's the second thing? What's the third thing you're going to do? Are you going to have opening procedures, and are you going to have closing procedures? And what's the first thing I got to do when I open the business? And what's the second thing I need to do? And the third, and when I close the business, and what's the first thing I got to do to close and wrap it up for the day? And the second and third, fourth thing to do that. Are we going to have the process of payroll? How is payroll going to work? How is cleaning going to work? How are we going to greet our customers? When you go into Moe's, they all say, welcome to Moe's. Are you going to have a welcome to your business greeting? Those are all the processes you need to think about. And so in essence, what we do is we call those the 5 P's: the pricing, the people, the product, the promotions, and the process. You put that in underneath the concept of what you're trying to do. And I'll just share with you, when I started Orange Theory Fitness for myself, I took everything that I had. This is a personal story, but I took everything that I had, all the finances that I had. I liquidated my 401k. I liquidated all of my investments. I ended up to be, it wasn't a lot of money, but it was about $473,000. And I put it all in to the business. And I'm going to tell you, I was nervous. I was scared, and I needed courage, and I needed some people to coach me along on that and say, this is what you've been waiting for, Terry, to do your own thing. Let's go ahead and get going. But the interesting piece of that is, we put $473,000. I did anyway, put $473,000 into the business. And as we got the business, the very first, my very first studio in St. Petersburg, Florida, one of the questions you ask yourself once you put all this money in and you build your first business and you buy the inventory and you get the program together and you hire the staff and you train the staff, is anybody really going to buy it? Is anybody really going to see the same value that you see in that business and spend the money to go ahead and do it? And that's what gets you really nervous. It wasn't only 3 or 4 years later I was able to take that $473,000. I sold a group of stores in Tampa for a little over $4.5 million. So I 10x'd my money. I took that money and invested in Austin, Texas. And in 3 years, I was able to 10x that amount of money very quickly again. The reason I'm telling you is when you're putting money out there and you're investing in yourself, you really have to do the things it takes to get going. And if it's going to be, it's up to me. I wanted to share a couple other things that I think are important in starting your own business. As you decide those first couple of pieces, then I think that you really have to find a model that works. And you say, well, Terry, what does that really mean? What I'm saying is, does the model make money? Is it a profitable business? You could be in business and do a lot of work and put forth a lot of effort, buy a lot of inventory, and you could end up either losing money or breaking even, and you don't have the capital in reserve to basically sustain that business over time until it grows, or maybe it never grows. And in essence, that model doesn't really make money. It's not a profitable model. We looked at that at Orange Theory Fitness. We were a little concerned about that at first when we took this concept and we put it in its very first studio. We said, is this even a model that can work? And so part of that is understanding capital structures and having what we call a source and use of funds list. And basically what you say is, if we need X amount of dollars, say you need $300,000 or you need $500,000 or you need $150,000. Every business is a little bit different. You might need $1 million. You might need more than that. But you basically say, what are the sources that I'm going to get that money from? And then on the right-hand side of that, you say, what am I going to use that money for, line item by line item? And the totals on both lines should add up. So you might have a sources, you might have an SBA loan, you might have investors, you might have your own personal money that you're going to put in. That adds up to $500,000. If you're like me and you're opening up an Orange Theory Fitness in the early days, it cost us about $500,000 to open up an Orange Theory Fitness. And, part of that was allocated to fitness equipment, $120,000. And then how much of that was for marketing, and how much of that was for the construction or the build out, and how much of that was for the sound system, how much of that was for the computers and the IT system that we had in there, and how much of that was for the legal team. You're going to have somebody put some legal docs for you together. And your sources of funds and your use of funds should all add up to be the same. You also want to make sure you have some contingency money in there in case things don't go as planned. And here's what I can tell you about business. It always takes a little bit longer than you planned, and it always costs you a little bit more than you thought. Always. Get yourself a contingency, get 10% of your capital stack or your capital structure, your use of funds, and keep that 10% in reserve. Also, you need to put together a forecast. A forecast is saying, this is what I think we can do. How many members are we going to sell? How many widgets are we going to sell? How many services are we going to provide? At what rate? And this is going to be our revenue. And then what's your expenses? What's your payroll expense? What's your rent expense going to be? What is your maintenance expense going to be? What is your janitorial expenses going to be? It's a little out there, but I'm just saying is you need to at least look at that and say, this is what I think. And that's the budget process, right? You're creating a 3-year budget and proving out the model. Once you identify that there's a model that can actually be profitable, you got to put that into reality, and you actually got to get started. And then the second thing is you have to have proof of concept, meaning that can you really prove it? It looks great on paper and the numbers all are perfect. And boy, I tell you, it lines up. And by the second, third month, or by the 6th month, you're pouring in the money and you're living the dream and you're living like a king. But the reality is can you really prove that to be true? That's where I said, you might invest all this money and then people go, man, I don't really know that I value your product or your service the same way as you do. But when they do, and you start selling it and you start generating the income, it starts to help you believe in what you're doing. I can't tell you how important proof of concept is for other people to believe that is, in fact, a good business model. It's not just on paper. It's actually proving it out. And the third thing, just to mention, is, are you capitalized correctly? And this is, you look at the number one reason why businesses fail in America, it's because people are short on capital. We certainly have seen that over the COVID situation where people had to close their business. They had to reopen their business. They had to cut back restaurants to 50%, 25%. Bars were closed. And then what happens is to get that business back up and running, you need to have capital in reserve to be able to pay the staff, to do the marketing, to kind of get that restarted. I would remind you that you need to really take a serious look at how your business is being capitalized. Do you have the right amount of capital to get it going? And do you have the right amount of capital in reserve in order to keep it going until it becomes profitable? Some other fine points you want to be thinking about is, who's your banking relationship going to be? Who's going to do your books? Who's your accountant of record, your bank of record? If you're going to go out and negotiate a lease, you need to get a broker. You're going to need to get an attorney involved to review your lease. I learned a long time ago from a good friend of mine, David Hardy. He said, if you don't have the money to get a good attorney, you don't have the money to start a business. I'm telling you, I learned it by experience. I went out and created an operating agreement in the very beginning that I couldn't afford. I thought I couldn't afford an expensive or a good attorney. So I got and it wasn't a bad attorney. It was just a less expensive attorney that wrote an operating agreement for me for $150 an hour. So the attorneys charged $150 versus, $450 or $750 an hour. And sure enough, when it came time for me where there was a problem with my partner, what I found out is I didn't have the right operating agreement. I should have spent the money early on getting a better operating agreement and a better partnership agreement. Go ahead and spend that money. You're going to have to decide who your broker of record is, who your attorney of record is, who your insurance company and provider is of record. Make sure you get that operating agreement, because that is the deal between the investors and between the partners. That'll tell you how distributions are going to be made. And, when things are going good, you never need an operating agreement. But when things are going bad, everything goes back to that operating agreement between the partners to say, this is how we're going to do business when we can't make a decision and we can't agree on things. One partner wants to get distributions and the other partner wants to reinvest in the business and grow the business. And one of the most important things is goal congruency between you and your partners. Make sure you have those pieces and parts talked through. You're going to need to get the articles of incorporation and your EIN numbers and registered with the state. And I know that sounds like an awful lot, but in reality, it's as simple as, what's the first thing I got to do? What's the second thing I got to do? What's the third thing I got to do? So to wrap it up for you today, number one is get your concept and the 5 P's in place. Number two, take a look at that forecast and make sure that the model actually works. Number 3 is get it started and provide proof of concept, and make sure you have the right capital to sustain the business until it becomes profitable. If you ever have any other questions, reach out to my line. You can comment on Tuesday with Terry. I think there's a comment section. There's a question section in there. I'd love to hear from you. If you want to start the business or you want to have a chat, love to hear what I can do to help you out with that. In the meantime, my name's Terry. I'm your friend. Go get that business started.